Right, good afternoon, learners. It's just 4 o'clock right now, this Thursday, uh, cold and rainy afternoon here in Cape Town. I don't know wherever you are. Um, Hope your weather is a little bit better, but yeah, we're very thankful for the rain. Anyway, it's grade 11 IT. My name is Mr. Freeman, and we're going to do one topic today, um, using methods to change delimiters. In other words, those characters uh, in strings that we usually read from text files. Those characters that are used to delimit or sit between different strings that we want to read. What if I want to change that delimiter to something else? Right, so again, I just want to quickly recap from what we've done this week so far, and I think we've actually started on that on Friday already last week. We did quite a lot of stuff. We've done functions. We've done procedures before that. We spoke about the rules when coding functions in depth. And we talked about validation and verification. In other words, validation, checking that something that is going to be typed in is actually expected, versus verification, which is basically whatever it is that we do, we go check that whatever's entered was actually truthful or not. But that verification, that is something that we deal with in theory, and the validation is the one that we most implement in our practical activities and exams and so on. So for validation checks that we've done the presence check. Basically, in a nutshell, did somebody enter something in the edit or whatever? The data type check, was it a string if I expected a string, or an integer, etc. And then the range check that we looked at is a check, validation check, that makes sure that if I want a specific range, like between 1 or 100, or the example that I've been using the last week of a grade, if I'm expecting grade 1 to grade 12, then I want you to enter like 7 or 8 or whatever, not 20 or -5. So that's the range check. And then we ended off 2 days ago with a checksum with the Loon algorithm to make sure that numbers, this is specifically for numbers, if I enter quite a long number, like a barcode or whatever, to make sure that those digits are actually entered in to some sort of degree of accuracy. And we use the last character or last digit of this long number to verify against an algorithm that we apply on digits 1 to, let's call it length -1. And we went on, we validated the SAID in Delphi. So you can go back to those lessons if you've missed them. And we created 3 functions. We continued on from there. So at the end of this lesson, we're going to replace delimiters, as I said, of a string with new delimiters. And in this whole activity, this Delphi activity that we'll be doing, is we're going to consolidate a few things that we've been learning the last 3 weeks or so. And the first one is text files, because I will be reading from a text file, a whole bunch of sentences. What am I going to do with those text files? Well, we're going to use a procedure to read from the text file and populate the array at the same time, using those procedures, as I said. Okay, so we are now going to jump into our activity. It's in the DBE Grade 11 Practical Textbook. It's on page 153. And we're going to open the Change Delimiter project in the folder called 06. You will find that on the link that I shared at the end of every lesson. You can download all those, the DBE textbooks, as well as the data files. And in chapter 6, you will get this project called Change Delimiter, and you can go and do it yourself then after this lesson. So I'm going to now jump to, firstly, the textbook. So there it is. It's question 2. And it is 2.1, replacing delimiters of a string with new delimiters. So the example is, so let's say I want to replace the space delimiter. So the string that I'm reading in could be a normal sentence with spaces in. and I decide I don't want spaces for whatever reason, my program doesn't like it, and I want to replace those spaces with the star or asterisk character. So the original string would be the fat cat jumps high, if that was the string. And then after my procedure changes everything, it becomes the star, fat, and so on. Okay, so let's go to my Delphi project. So it's basic. Looks like I've got a memo over here and 2 edits. There's the original delimiter. So for some reason, I need to know beforehand what that original delimiter was, as well as the new delimiter that I want to change it to. Okay, so let's go to our activity. It says, okay, so open the change delimiter project, which I've just done, and change from that folder and do the following. So there's not too much, so I'll go quite slowly and make sure that we cover everything in detail. If there are any questions from anybody, please just stop me. So the first one is write a procedure called change delimiters to accept a sentence. Okay, so I'm going to stop right there. I'm going to say write a procedure, change delimiters. I'm going to go back, go into my code, and because everything happens inside my form, nothing is called from a different form. Well, I can see that because that's the only unit that is in my project. And I know that because we're in grade 11 and we haven't done multiple forms or object orientation yet. So I'm going to go to code and I'm going to use it in private. Why make it public if it's not going to be used externally? So they say there that we have to declare a procedure. And the keyword to declare a procedure is simply procedure. Okay. So there's that. And then secondly, they say the name is change delimiters. Okay. So there's change delimiters. I just copied and pasted. So I've gotten covered the first, let's say, 4 words of this question, 5 words. Then it carries on to accept a sentence. Now that clue over there, accept a sentence, is going to be my parameter. I need a sentence. I can't find it anywhere in the program. You have to give me the sentence and you give it via a parameter. And for the time being, I would assume that a sentence would be of type string. So I'm going to make a parameter and I'm going to call it S sentence. And I'm going to say it's of type string. Okay. Seeing that this is a procedure and not a function, I will not return anything. So I won't have this afterwards. So it's just my procedure and I end my semicolon. Before we do the Control-Shift-C to create my procedure in my implementation section of my code, I just want to read the rest of the question. So write a procedure, change delimiters to accept a sentence, as well as the current delimiter of the string, okay, and the new delimiter of the sentence. Okay, well, string here they use string, there they use sentence, but it's all the same thing over here. I don't know why they did that. And seeing that a delimiter will not necessarily only be one character, I'm not going to make it of type char. I'm going to make it of type string. So I'm going to add a second and a third parameter. So my second parameter is the current delimiter. So let's call it, let's go in here. And I'm going to say, well, they're all of all type string. So I'll just go over here and say, comma, S current delimiter. Okay. Okay, so the current delimiter of the string and the new delimiter of the sentence or string. So I need one more parameter, so I'll need 3 parameters in total. So new delimiter. Delimiter. Okay, so this procedure will accept 3 strings as parameters. Please take note of the order. You must follow the correct order. If you go current delimiter first, then when you call this procedure, you have to go current delimiter first. But I just think it makes sense that we follow the order in the way they ask it over here. Okay, so that looks like the declaration part, because the next sentence says, replace the current delimiter with a new delimiter, and then display the original sentence and the new sentence one below the other. So let's just chat about this quickly, because this is a procedure. I can't return anything. So typically, if I had to design this and if I had the freedom to do this, so let's say this was my pattern, I wanted to change a delimiter of some sort, I probably would have chosen a function where I also have the three parameters, so your sentence, the current delimiter, and the new delimiter, but then I would return the new string, because that gives the form or the button calling this the freedom to do whatever it wants with that sentence. If it wanted to store it in a new array or in a text file, or display it in a show message or in a memo in this case, it would have the freedom. But because this is a procedure, and because I'm going to follow the way they ask it, because I want my marks, because it's a procedure, I can't change something. So I probably would have to either set some global variable, which I don't have, or in this case, they say, go on and display this original sentence, and then the new sentence, one below the other, and I'm assuming they're referring to the memo. So I'll just do that, although I don't really believe in the style. We'll carry on and do that. Okay, so there must be a million ways of doing this. One way is we could loop through the entire length of the sentence, one character at a time, and check with an if statement every single character in sequence to see if it is equal to the current delimiter. If it is equal to the current delimiter, I will add this new string that I'm constructing, this new sentence. Okay, I will add that to this new sentence, my current delimiter. And if it's not the delimiter, I will just add that character of my sentence. So in other words, if I'm looking for a space and I want to replace it with a star, I'm checking every single character in the sentence, and if it is an A, I'm going to leave it as is. I'm going to add that A to my new sentence. However, if I find my space, I would rather say, no, don't put that character there, rather put my new delimiter in its place. So for this, we're going to start off by going Control-Shift-C, and if everything was fine with my declaration, the new procedure implementation would appear magically over here. The only difference between, well, the two differences is the position. So my declaration is over here where I placed it in private. Okay, that's before my implementation part of my class. And the implementation goes here. So that's the first difference. And the second difference is the name of the class precedes the name of the procedure with a dot in between with my implementation. That's the only difference. Okay, so this is where we're going to begin. And I'm going to create a variable, and I'm going to call that new sentence. This is the sentence that I'm going to be constructing, and that is of type string. Because I will be adding to my string one character at a time, either the existing character, if it's not a space, or the new delimiter, if it is a space, I need to initialize my new sentence string to an empty string, because I want to add to that. So I'm going to say new sentence, and I'm going to say becomes open as apostrophe and close the apostrophe. So that's initializing it to an empty or a blank string. Before this, it was just null. That's slightly different to being a blank, an empty string. And if you don't do that, you could have some issues. Your program may not compile if you don't do that and you want to add. It's fine if I'm assigning somewhere in my for loop or my if statement, but if I'm adding one character at a time, I need to initialize it to a blank string first. Okay, so that's that part. So I want to now loop through my entire sentence as passed as a parameter. So I'll use a for loop, and I'm going to say for I1, because that would be the first position of the character at position 1, all the way to length of my parameter, whatever is passed as a sentence in there. Okay, so that's my for statement. I'm just bringing my begin and end blocks in there. Okay, so now we got this part. Now we get to the stage where I'm going to ask my question. I want to know if the current character at position I is equal to whatever this current delimiter is. That's the first question. That's the big question I'm asking. So I'm saying, okay, if, let's say, a sentence at position I, when I say that, when I call this at position I, I'm referring to a sentence not as a string anymore, but as an array of characters. And I'm saying if the character from the sentence at position I, in other words, position 1, the first one, if that thing equals my current delimiter, what then? That means I found my space. So what should I do? Okay, I need to add the new delimiter. I don't want to add the space. I want to add the new delimiter in its place. So I'm going to say S new sentence, which is currently empty, becomes whatever S new sentence was at that point. And this is the step why it is so important to initialize it with an empty string. Because the very first time I'm doing that, I want this to be empty, not null. Otherwise, I'm going to get a funny output. So I'm adding a sentence plus my new delimiter. Okay. What if it's not a space or whatever that current delimiter is? So then I'm going to say end else. Okay. Then I just want to rather add the actual character that to the end of my string. So I'm going to say S new sentence becomes whatever it had at that stage plus the character that I checked for, because it wasn't a space, it was a K or a B or whatever, but that K or B needs to be added, needs to be kept, mustn't be lost. So I'm just going to put that there. So S sentence at position, not the whole sentence, just the character in its position. Okay, so let's just go back here. It says replace the current delimiter with a new delimiter. I think we've done that now, because by the time I'm done with this for loop, I would have checked every single character. I would have gone through the entire S sentence, and I would have been able to create and compile and add the entire S new sentence. So I should have both of them. By the time I exit my, and I'll check carefully, exit my for loop over there. So this is where I want to continue. Now they say display the original sentence and the new sentence, one below the other. If I just look over here, this is what they want us to have at the end. It's just quite strange here. I think there's a bit of a mistake in the example, because if my original delimiter was a space, I'm assuming they put a space there because I can't see anything, and the new delimiter is a hash, I think there's a mistake here. And then I think it should have been that sentence over there is fine, but the second human development depends on nature and nurture should possibly be, or should be, human hash development, hash and so on. But let's see if we can get that when we actually run this program to see if it works. So I'm going to then say memo display dot lines dot add, and I'm going to first do the original sentence. Okay, so it was quite important that we didn't change that. And then right after this, we say lines dot add the new sentence. So that is called S new sentence. Right, and I think what they've done here is they've got little extra blank lines in between every. Well, let's leave that over there. I'm just going to leave that over there. What we could do is maybe add a plus #13. What does plus #13 do? It adds an extra line. The alternative is to have a third mem display lines.add with nothing in it, and that will create another line. So this is the first sentence that I've done. Okay, so I'm assuming somewhere in my code further along, I would be reading multiple strings into an array, and then I'll be looping that array. And each time when I loop that array, I'll be calling this procedure. For every single sentence, it would then end up displaying the old and the new and a blank line. And then the next time that I loop, old, new, and so on for the second and third and fourth sentences. Okay. I think we've covered that, hey? I think that change delimiters is done. Remind me to say something about this at the end if we do have time. B, write a procedure. Okay, so I'm going to go up. And below this procedure, I'm going to start off by saying procedure. Why do we have to read the entire sentence? I know I'm going to make a procedure, so stop right there. So it's procedure. Okay, let's carry on. Write a procedure, read file data. I'm going to stop again. I know this is correct so far with only reading the first 4 words. Write a procedure, read file data to read the data stored in the text file sentences.txt. Let's see what that is all about. I'm going to quickly open this. There's sentences. Okay, so it's got your why holidays are important. Okay, dokes, and then there's the other lines, one after each other. Looks like that first line seems to be a heading of some sort. Okay. So write a procedure, read file data to read the data stored in the text file, sentences.txt. And then while I'm at it, I'm going to store this in an array called R sentences. You may assume that the text file may not contain more than 10 entries. So we can, when we declare this, we can just hard code it to 10, size 10. But I think if I'm not mistaken, it may have been done for us. Yes, here we go. There's our global variable. So there's an R sentences array of size 1 to 10 of string. So I want to read every single line until the end. Okay, and that's probably when I'm going to use my count for my counter type integer. That's going to keep a tab of how many string of sentences did I actually store in my array. My array's possible size is 10. I can have a maximum of 10 sentences, but I want to keep a tab on the actual number. Let's say there's only 4 sentences. I want to keep a tab on that and know, okay, I know I've only got 4 sentences. I've only populated the array in the first 4 positions of it. Okay. So I think I have done read file data. Do we need anything else? Doesn't look like it. We don't need that. They don't say that we have to receive that as a parameter. You can if you want, but I don't say that. So that's probably going to be a hard code, which I'll do. So this procedure, in my opinion, will end right there, and I won't need any additional parameters. So I'll carry on with my Control-Shift-C, and I can start. If I want to read from a text file, I need at least a text file object, and that is declared here by variables, and I'm going to call it sline. Oh, sorry, I'm going to need sline. Yes, I might as well do that because I want to read every single line, but I'm also going to need my text file type. So I'm going to call that, let's call it tfile. Okay, and that is of type text file. Don't just call it file, it won't work. It's got to be of type text file over there. Okay, and now I want to read. How do I open a text file for reading? Think back about 3 weeks. If I want to open a text file, I need to associate my Delphi tfile object with the actual text file. We use the assign file procedure to do that. And then to actually open this and take my cursor to the first line over here, we use the reset procedure. So I'm going to start off with associating. So I'm going to say assign file. There it is. And the first one it wants is the file name, well, the file, and then the file name as a string. So we know the file is tfile, and the second parameter is this sentences.txt, and that is a string, so I'm going to put it in as a string. So there my file is assigned. I'm going to want to just make absolutely sure that my text file exists, and there's two ways of doing that. You either use the if file exists or the if not exists, or you can use a try statement for that. Let's use the if statement. So I'm going to say if file exists, and there it is. And the catch, what you always need to remember, the parameter that I pass to file exists is the name of the file, not the file type. Even though it has been associated, it's the name. It's that string over there that I need to pass. And I've done that a few times, and then I would be scratching around for about 10 minutes until I realized what my mistake was. So I'm saying if file exists, I want to continue reading that file. But if it doesn't exist, I want to do two things quickly. I'm going to send a message, and I'm going to exit this procedure. So I'm going to need a begin and end block for this. And so I'm going to just say show message and say file not found. Right, that's the first part. And then why bother carrying on with the rest of the procedure if I don't find the file? So at this point, I'm going to say, well, if I don't find the file, exit right now. So that if I reach this far in my body of my procedure, what does that mean? It means I actually did find that file over there. So now I can safely call my reset procedure, and I reset on the name of the file this time. Okay, so it's just stuff that you have to remember, please. And now then the next one is I want to now loop through my text file for how many ever lines there are. So that is a question. I don't know how many lines there are. So it's a loop. So it's going to be a while loop, because this will terminate whenever the sentence is in. I don't know. If I knew, I could have used a for loop, but I don't know. Okay, so while, and then there's the end of file. Okay, end of file. Which file? tfile. But not while end of file. I want to do stuff while I have not reached the end of the file. While I'm not in the end of the file, remember that reset button is now sitting there waiting. Eventually it's going to get there, and then I'm going to reach the end of the file, I'll exit my while loop. But at the moment I'm over here. So I'm saying while not end of file, what am I doing? Well, simple. I'm going to read the line. Where am I reading it in from? I'm reading it from tfile, that specific line, and I'm reading it into a string. Which string? S line. Okay, so what have I just done? I've asked it to read that entire line, okay, and place that line into S line, and finally move to the second line and go back to the while statement and carry on until the end. So that's what I've done there. But this is not enough, because the question says, where are we? And store the values, in other words, those sentences, in an array called R sentences. And I have to, how do you reference an array? You reference it at the array at position, whatever. Now that position we forgot about. I need to keep a tab on my number of lines. So before I go into my while loop, I want to just initialize my counter. This variable over there, I haven't initialized that. No, not this one. My I count. So I want to give it a value of 0 because I haven't counted any lines yet. But the moment I'm able to access be in this while loop, I know there is a line. So at this point, I'm going to say increment. And what is that I'm incrementing again? It's I count. And I'm not putting an extra parameter, so I'm using the default increment I count by 1. So at this point, I count is no longer 0. It's now 1, and then 2, and then 3, and so on. Before it goes 2, I want to store what's in S line into that position in my array. So array sentences at position I count, so at the first position, and that position there must become whatever S line was. Okay, guys, grade 11s, you can do this in one line. You can call read line T file and then R sentences I count. There's nothing wrong with that, but I just thought I would break it down into 3 steps. So I think we've done that. So where are we now? And store the values in array sentences. You may assume that the text file may not contain more than 10 entries. So the read file data has done its job. So now we're done with our 2 procedures. Thirdly, I need to create an on-click event for the change delimiter button. Okay, so what are they talking about? This change delimiter button over here. So on its event that I've just created there, what must we do? It says read the original delimiter over here and the new delimiter, and let's just go and store them in variables. So 2 variables, and it's going to be S. Let's give it a different name, old delimiter. I keep on typing like that, as well as S new delimiter. They're both of type string. I can do that, that's fine. Because remember my change delimiters procedure, that is okay if my S new delimiter here is the same as here, because they live in different spaces. They both have local scope. This one will live and die in this procedure, and that one will live and die in that procedure. They happen to be carrying the same concept, but this S new delimiter will become my actual parameter when I call this procedure. And the value from that delimiter, we're probably going to put in a hash or something. That's going to be my actual value parameter passed into here and then magically transformed into my formal parameter when I call the procedure, which we'll do right now. Okay, so I got that there. Let's come back. So read the original letter. So those are 2 edits. So I'm going to say S old delimiter becomes some sort of edit, I imagine. There it is, original delimiter dot text, and then the same for the new delimiter becomes edit new delimiter dot text. Okay, should be fine. I think I've covered that part now. So read the original delimiter and the new delimiter from the edit boxes. Then we're going to call the procedure read file data. Okay, now remember this is a procedure, so I can call the procedure as one line as its own statement. This procedure goes and populates the memo in any case. And because these procedures are bound to the form and only used in the form, it's okay. I can let it slide. It can do its job in a memo. But you wouldn't want to do that if you're calling this procedure from a different class. So now, how do I call this? So the read file data, as far as I remember, doesn't take any parameters because we hard-coded the sentence in there. So that's as simple as that. Done. So after this step, I've read my file and I've populated my array. Now my array is full of sentences. Nothing has changed with those sentences yet. I've just read them. Next one. Call the procedure change delimiters. Now this is the one that takes my 3 parameters, and we're going to want to loop now through this array. So call the procedure change delimiters to change the original delimiter of the strings stored in the R sentences with a new delimiter. Okay, so here's the trick, guys. My change delimiter, I would have to call within a loop, because my parameters is, remember, sentence, old delimiter, new delimiter, not array. I can't just call this once and it's going to magically loop through an array. Suppose you can do that. If you can pass the entire array, that's possible. But the structure here is one sentence. So the change delimiters would be inside a loop, reading every string from the array one at a time. So I'm going to start with that first. I'm going to say, okay, for. Why can I use a for loop? Because I know how many strings are stored in my array. How do I know that? Because I kept on incrementing I count. So I can go for I 1. I know I start at 1 because my position starts at 1. All the way to I count. That's one of the big reasons why I count is declared globally, because I'm now having multiple procedures accessing the same variable. And in that case, you need to make it a global variable. Okay, so now I'm looping from 1 to I count, and I'm going to say begin and end. And what do I want to do each time? Well, let's see. I want to call the change delimiters every single time. So let's call that. So change delimiters. It's expecting a string. Which string? The string inside the array at position I. So I'm going to call that now R. Why is it doing that? What did we call the sentences? Okay. At the moment, I'm referencing the array. I don't want that. I want to reference the string inside the array. And that's why I'm going to say at position I. So there's my string that I want to change. Okay. And then secondly is, I think that was my old or the current delimiter. So I would have to pass whatever I named today. So that would be old delimiter. And then the last one is whatever I call this variable that I stored my new delimiter in as my parameter. So I call this new delimiter. Okay. So in effect, just to show you, change delimiters takes the 3 parameters. Those are my actual values. That's why it's called actual parameters. And in each one of these actual parameters will be a value. Okay. The actual first sentence, that's my value. My space and my hash, those will be the value parameters. And they will be passed on to this change delimiters, and each one of those values would be passed on into each one of these variables over here, which are my formal parameters. And then that is how this procedure accesses those values in order to do its task. And that should be that as far as I'm concerned. So let's see what happens. Let's just make sure, call a procedure to change the original delimiter of the string stored in our sentence with the new delimiter. Now, you know, in typical Mr. Freeman style, I'm probably going to have 1,000 errors. So let's see. Okay, well, for a change, I didn't. So I'm going to make this a space, and let's make that a hash. Let's run and see what happens. Great. Okay, so there was something wrong. My memo wasn't cleared, so we can clear that first. And then we have the why holidays are important and why holidays are important with my hashes. I see there's no extra lines, and I think that's due because I've added it to a memo and not a rich edit. So I can't just use the hash 13 here. So I have to go fix that. So firstly, we need to go clear. And secondly, we need to go and add that line correctly. So let's do that right now. So in my procedure over here, I'm just going to say memo display.clear. And instead of a hash 13, because that didn't work with the memo, I'm going to just manually add a blank line. So mem display lines dot add. And let's just do that for extra measure. Okay, let's try again. Fantastic. So I'm going to put a space, and this time I'll just do a star. See if that works. What? Oh my goodness. What have I done? I've only got the last one. Where did I place this clear? Okay. Because I placed it, yes, guys, that was a silly mistake. Because I placed it in the procedure, I'm clearing it every single time I'm called, but this procedure is called inside a loop over here. So what am I doing? I'm going to a while loop, I'm reading the first one of the array, and then I'm adding those sentences, and then what do I do the next time? I clear it again. So the only sentences I see are the last two sentences, the last line of the sentence and the change line. So this must definitely not go here. That's a big mistake. Not too big. I can just cut it out here. And I want to rather go to where my button is. Now, which one is the button over here? Okay, there's my button. So before I go into my loop, I'm rather going to put my mem display dot clear. Let's see if it works now. So I'm going to go space, and this time I'm going to use a space, and next I'm going to use a percentage and change the delimiter, and that is actually what I wanted. I see there that it has been cut off, so there's no space, but I'm assuming that the first sentence was there at the top, and that actually answers my question. Where was the first sentence? It's just a case of my memo size wasn't correctly made when the design of this was built. But I think you get the essence here. I read a text file into an array using a procedure, and then I went and one sentence at a time. You see, this job over here is the execution of one call of my procedure. Because it's in a loop, it gets called over and over again with every new file. Hope that makes sense, guys. And I think that is the end of this Delphi project. And I want you to try and do this yourselves. See if you can get that done. And we're done. So this is basically me finished with user-defined methods, my formal teaching. What I'll be doing from tomorrow, and this is going to take 6 lessons, I think. I'm assuming it's going to take about 6 lessons. From tomorrow, I'm going to go through 3 exam questions from last year's November exam. Okay, so that is like fresh, and it is sort of an end-year exam. And as I said, you have the skills already to do question 1, 3, and 4. Question 2, that's work that's not covered yet, and that will be covered after this, after some theory. Then we'll do the database reading, and then we can do the question 2 right after that. But for tomorrow, what we're going to do is we're going to do the question 1, or the first part of question 1, general programming, and then we'll do the second part of question 1 and carry on and finish next week, Friday. So go to this link, please, where you get your textbooks. I've already placed the question 1 folder in that link, and you can download that so long and get it ready so you can move and code this with me. And I'm going to expect you to please finish your part of the question for every single lesson. Thank you, guys. That is it from me, and I'll see you tomorrow.